labor and the expression of worth is our work, it is a context into which many forms of inquiry and practice may reside. Creation stories and symbolic language. I witnessed my life story as it passed through the realms of nihilism and absolute materialist scientism. As I repented for my childhood ignorance and naivete concerning the evils of my magical thinking, as I attempted to scrape from my inner being every remnant of superstitious folly. Yes, even as I trained my rational mind to the best of my ability to sniff out any mental formations that stunk of what we call belief. Even then, I could only experience a sense of wonder as I envisioned the biological evolution of what we call our consciousness. You are now listening to that voice as it realizes its own existence through this particular manifestation of consciousness that I call me. My science books I could not help but hold as holy scriptures, and I devoted myself to the teachings of those who had done their best work since our beautiful Darwin broke to us the terribly sacred news when he said, "We all originate from the same root system of the tree of life. We are of the one life." So now we understand that the hominins and the hominids, those dear brothers and sisters who came down from the trees, are our ancestors. The story of biology tells us that we all arose from Africa. It is very murky. No one knows enough to piece together the story in its entirety. We have discovered lots of fossils, remnants of these ancient ones who began to walk upright. Yes, many deep mysteries surround the evolution of those ones we have called Homo sapiens. And before that, we were the mammals that hid in the logs as the little dinos were intent on making us their meal. 65 million years ago, an asteroid strikes the Earth. All the big animals are dead. Now these scrounging, hairy, warm-blooded creatures start forging forward along this evolutionary path. And they are now speaking to you, dear reader, of their very existence through this one that you call Trav. How is that for consciousness speaking from beyond the grave? Little mouse ghosts speaking of the love that they passed down to their progeny so that you can now ponder the significance of Mozart. Piecing this story together for myself was an act of love. Yes, an act of grace, I can honestly say. Understanding myself as part of a greater expression of life that arose from a sacred primordial soup helps me to understand myself more clearly. It helps me to understand why I might feel so confused about life sometimes. I live with this animal, and this animal is me. I am nature, not separate from nature. When I understand that I was born with basically the same brain as my hunter-gatherer ancestors 35,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, it helps me to understand why vast amounts of concrete and combustion engines might not feel real friendly to me. Do you ever think about whales? I saw just the other day on my Facebook feed the eye of a whale as it surfaced from the deep. The whale seemed to peer directly into the camera. What I saw in that eye was, I am. Whales are warm-blooded brothers and sisters too, warm-blooded creatures that raise their young in cold water. They communicate with one another. They speak to each other, and we cannot yet detect with how much detail they can communicate with their clicks and whistles. Humans have developed what we call symbolic language. We can use language to conjure in one another's minds these pictures, timelines, and events. Did I mention yet that there are Now, these renowned mathematicians who are saying that there just was not enough time for evolution to have happened as randomly as our materialist mind insists. And we never imagined that DNA could be altered by experience, that epigenetic trauma can be passed on to offspring, a DNA expression that was written after conception. And then there was Einstein. He was deeply troubled by what he called spooky action, quantum entanglement, instantaneous communication between two particles a universe apart, faster than light communication. This knowledge may cause us to question how real our conception of space-time actually is. And also, by the way, time is relative. Can you understand how deeply that information can warp the human sense of space, time, and matter? Einstein, our brother, who rode those light beams through the sky, suggested that all of us should take a dive into the quantum, even if we are not planning on a career in physics. I warn you, that dive might leave you having to redefine reality for yourself. It's nothing to take lightly, or should I say, you sure as hell better be prepared to let go, to stop taking all of this so seriously, rule number 62, because things are not nearly as solid as we once thought they were. And once we have done our homework, we realize that all of this research into the nature of the material world is just the continued inquiry that is represented by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. There are these basic philosophic questions. We may realize that our individual mind is asking the same questions that the generations have already dug up. What is reality? What can we really know? And how can we know it? It is no longer just the physicists who are searching for a unifying equation, a unifying theory. Humanity now finds itself on this evolutionary threshold, desperately failing to cooperate with one another, to feed one another, to shelter one another. We have created these systems that are not earth-friendly. Our systems are not whale-friendly. Our very own systems are not even human-friendly. We have to question that, right? Along the lines of questioning and criticism, the United States Declaration of Independence tells us that whatever government that we see over us is the government that we have consented to. This speaks of our responsibility to educate ourselves and commit to the process of the most peaceful overturning of a government that does not serve us. Here is what the Declaration of Independence says. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. This speaks of responsibility to me. Responsibility to an impossibly large cause. Yet, in our current state, if we cannot believe that we have the power to champion, even in the most minute way, our impossibly large cause, then where is the hope? And I, my friend, am choosing hope today. And this is what our education is for, to increase our love sufficiently that our species may cross over this evolutionary threshold which we currently find ourselves stumbling toward. An impossible task without faith, hope, and love. Back to the numbers. An equation is a number sentence. We like our equations to be true. But now we have come to understand that the equations for the big realities do not work for the small realities. And now the physicists begin to sound very much like priests as they consider the possibility that we may have just woke up to an infinite multiverse. It is a lot to take in. It is a broad view. It is a whole lot to consider, but as I have mentioned before, I believe that this type of knowledge, when sought with healthy intent, can expand our consciousness. And with that expansion of consciousness, we may also experience an expansion of our compassion. Yes, compassion expanding knowledge of the cosmos. When I understand myself as this most recent iteration of the evolution of life consciousness, I simultaneously find myself in an expanded state of grace. A developed scientist would not ask you to believe in evolution. That would be ridiculous. Believing in evolution would do you no good. But when we open up our science books, we are opening up our minds to generations of human work, the sacred development of the rational mind. You are peering into that curious mind that is not separate from your own mind. It is not separate from God's mind. We continue to peel back layers of reality through the use of our rational mind. And these deep inquiries that we make into the true nature of material reality are now even deconstructing what we once thought the rational mind had settled once and for all. The world does not look like we think it looks. Our physical senses can only measure a very narrow spectrum of the entirety of existence. At some point, we may come to recognize that whether we consider ourselves to be of the rational scientific mind or one of a more mystical nature, that we are all using symbolic language and we are all telling creation stories. But no matter what we do, we seem to be incapable of ceasing the storytelling. This is where a solid foundation in the simplest meditative techniques becomes so necessary. This is where we consciously disidentify from our personal stories and begin to identify with the larger story, the cosmic story, the story that connects us to that one love of which our brother Bob Marley sang. I do not expect you to believe anything that I say. I do hope, however, to encourage you as you bravely continue your own inquiries. And I hope that they become our inquiries. Labor and the expression of worth is our work. It is a context into which many forms of inquiry and practice may reside. We must develop the endurance and the tenacity to continue our personal inquiry into the true nature of reality, even when that inquiry leads us into the most dangerous territories. To venture into these unknown territories means almost always certain death when we are alone. And there are certainly deaths also that we must die as we allow what we once thought we knew to dissolve into the nothingness, to dissipate into the great void. It is this death that all the great wisdom practices point to. We must face this death every day, as our hunter-gatherer ancestors did. We must band together, reigniting those hunter-gatherer brains to function at their highest potential. We must integrate all the stories, using only what is valuable to us for the moment. We must become a student of everything and everyone for the purpose of knowing our own true authority, which arises from within. We must learn how to respond correctly to inspiration as it arrives. We must hold on to the visions that we receive while not forming unnecessary attachments to them. We must learn how to follow the herds and the harvest. We must liberate ourselves from any system which perpetuates injustice. We must learn to stoke those fires of liberation within ourselves and within each other, and we must learn to wisely communicate that spirit of liberation to those generations who are coming after us. We are the rebels now. It is written into our Constitution, deep in our DNA. Love asks us to rise up to that which is unjust. Slavery was never abolished. That is common knowledge now. All illusion of the American dream has dissolved before our eyes. We have arrived at this moment together. We are holding these fishing nets in our hands. And there is one who is approaching us. He says to us, "Drop your nets, kids. This is going to require your full attention." It is that ancient one who empowers us now to drop those nets for the purpose of expressing the deepest love that this world has ever known. You may divorce yourselves from any literal interpretation of both scientific and mystical language. You may divorce yourself from any form that does not serve you anymore, any form that does not serve us anymore. That is what love does. It liberates us from any form that inhibits love. And this is the heart of that one we have called God. The heart of the liberator lives in you.